friends, a big hello to everyone. Today we have unusual memories about how former allies became opponents, specifically how the Finns skillfully switched sides in 1944 and how SS soldiers had to flee from Finland, entering into combat with their former comrades in arms. The history of the Second World War is full of sharp turns, but some of them still sound almost unbelievable today. I wish you an enjoyable listening experience. At the beginning of September came the news that made the ground seem to vanish beneath our feet. Finland had agreed to an armistice with the Soviet Union. At that moment, I was lying in a field hospital, not in a trench, not on watch, but on a hard cot, with a swollen ankle that throbbed as if a second heart were beating inside it. The pain was dull and persistent, yet I did not know then that a far more painful blow lay ahead than any wound. A few days later, the main announcement followed. German troops were required to leave Finland by September 15th. Less than 2 weeks, nearly 900 kilometers of roads, swamps, and northern forests, under rain, under fire, under the threat of a blow from behind. In a hospital, they always know more than at the front. Rumors appear there sooner, assumptions are formed earlier, whispers about tomorrow begin more quickly. We learned about the plan to withdraw the Lapland army northward, toward the Norwegian border. Our division was to cover the southern flank, in effect, to become the rear guard of the entire army. 300 kilometers of stretched positions. Taiga. A single road. A long, Tajilas retreat under possible pressure from 2 sides at once. We tried to joke, imagined surviving in the forest, hunting, mushrooms, berries. But we understood. The forests had long since emptied from the thunder of war. The game had fled, as had the old silence. Not once did anyone utter the word capitulation, not because we were fearless, simply because that word did not fit into our idea of tomorrow. Then came another condition. If we did not leave voluntarily, the Finnish army would be required to drive us out by force. We were silent for a long time. It was difficult to accept that those with whom we had stood shoulder to shoulder for 3 years would now be obliged to fire at us. I remembered their winter of 1939. Endurance, cold, white camouflage against the snow. My respect for them did not disappear even now. In our unit, there was a sapper, his arm bandaged, a holder of the gold German cross. He spoke calmly, almost wearily. If they have a chance to save their country, they are obliged to leave the war. Who are we to judge them? He had already begun to doubt the outcome of the war. He spoke of it openly, and in his words, there was not weakness, but sobriety. We left our positions at night. The forest pressed in from all sides. The road stretched ahead like a pale, narrow strip through black trunks, and it seemed not to lead north, but into the unknown. Later, already in Kittilä, I learned about Manhard. The Finns had landed in Tornio, seized warehouses, supply trains, transport with wounded men. Our reconnaissance battalion entered the fight for the town. Manhard spotted a column of vehicles marked with red crosses, stranded on a peninsula. He decided to get them out. 7 men went with him that night. Submachine guns, a machine gun, grenades. A short, tense silence before action. A signal flare suddenly tore open the darkness. For a second, the sand and the figures turned white, like in a photograph. A burst of fire, and Manhard fell. The vehicles were saved. They broke through the bridge and crossed into Sweden. The wounded were saved. But Manhard remained there. From that moment, it became final. The Finns were no longer allies. Near Tukkola, we were outflanked. The regiment was cut in 2. Ahead, a blocking force. Behind, the rearguard fighting. We took positions by a ravine with a bridge. Anti-aircraft guns were dragged across the crossing with a metallic roar. The battalion commander raced about in a motorcycle sidecar, shouting, waving his arms, pushing the men forward. 3 companies attacked at once, frontally and from the flank. We fired at the flashes in the forest. The Russians held stubbornly. At some point, everything merged into a continuous roar and smoke. The ground trembled. The air smelled of burning and wet pine. And then, the breakthrough. We lost men. 2 machine gun crews stayed behind to cover the withdrawal and did not return. It was our last battle against the Russians on that land. South of Monyo, the supply trains were ambushed. Dead mules, overturned wagons, wounded dragged out from under fire. The regimental commander was killed at night during a sudden Finnish raid on headquarters. We took positions by the river, the border with Sweden. On the far bank stood red houses. People watched us from a distance, as if this were a foreign war that had suddenly come too close to their quiet lives. When a Finnish column appeared at the bend, we opened fire. They took cover, returned fire, then withdrew. Later, we had to break northward under mortar fire. An anti-aircraft gun set up directly on the road and fired almost point blank. The battalion commander was again in front. We cleared a kilometer of road in a short, furious assault. Some Finns crossed the river into Sweden. We did not fire at their backs. Muonio was later burned. From a hill, we watched the flames devour the village. Wooden walls collapsed one after another. The church stood the longest, as if resisting the fire. Then it too disappeared. That was when I first clearly understood. War knows no gratitude. It erases yesterday's friendship as easily as wind wipes away footprints in the sand. The frost struck suddenly, -36. The air rang with cold. The tents stood in pits dug into the snow. The mules huddled together, motionless, covered with frost. Without them, we would not have survived. They pulled the wagons when engines froze, when men could barely remain on their feet. We marched at night, 30 or 40 kilometers at a time. We were hungry. Sometimes it seemed that one more step, and you would lie down in the snow, and nothing would matter anymore. The Finns gradually ceased their pursuit. In those empty spaces, the Arctic winter became our common enemy. We covered the last 30 kilometers on Finnish soil in silence. We knew we were the last on that road. We reached the coast. Behind us lay nearly 900 kilometers of marching, then hundreds more. Johann Foss later fought in the West, was taken prisoner, and was released only at the end of 1946. Sometimes I wonder, what remains of war after the years pass? Not the speeches of commanders, not the medals. What remain are faces, voices, a bridge over a cold river, the flames of Muonio, and the understanding that on both sides of the line of fire stood young men who wanted only one thing, to survive and return home. And perhaps that was the only truly human thing in that autumn. Friends, thank you very much for listening. I would greatly appreciate it if you supported this video with your activity on the channel. Good luck to everyone, and goodbye. See you in the next episode.